join us on the Bigwater podcast. I am Ross Robertson, and fishing is what I do. You guys all know that, but we got to talk about it too, especially when the wind is blowing like a son of a gun out there today. So I've got a guy that kind of does like what I do. I don't want to put him in that basket. He may get disappointed, but we've got Nate Zelinsky over there in Colorado way. Nate, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, man. It's an honor. I'm excited to be here.
You know, we've talked a few times, but in full disclosure, you know, we don't really know each other well. We talked a couple times at ICAST, and we work on the ice team together. But we remarkably kind of do pretty similar things, I guess. You could probably argue that.
Absolutely, 100%. I would say definitely that. We live on the water. I think whether we call it our work or our dream or whatever you want to talk about, I think everybody else views it as a dream. I think you and I both view it a little bit more as a lot of hard work. But we live on the water chasing fish.
You know, as we do these podcasts or just different TV things through the years, it's nice to have a guy that, you know, because again, no one wants to hear you complain. Like when I'm rigging a boat, you know, and they're like, oh, you got a new boat and you're rigging, oh, yeah. Or the same thing, you know, talking about how many hours on the water. People are like, I'd love to get out of the factory and do that. But really, you know, just like yesterday, we shot, you know, between basically 12, 13 hours, about a 16-hour day. And, you know, that's not a normal day necessarily, but it's not a not normal day. And when I was trying to catch up with you, you know, you had things going on, and then you were headed out for a night trip, you know, going night walleye fishing. We're going to be back till 1 a.m. And, you know, if you want a 9 to 5, our line of work sure as hell ain't the place to be, is it?
That's for sure. You know, it's crazy. And I'm sure you're the same. If you look at a calendar year, you spend more time floating or walking on water by far than you do land. And people don't realize that, but it's the truth. I mean, we literally spend more time on water than we do on land. It's just one of those things. And yeah, whether you can't handle the hours or you can't handle the lack of sleep, and that's probably the biggest thing that I'd say gets to me. You just don't sleep. I mean, whether you do a 6 or an 8 hour type trip and you stack 2 of those in a day, you know, you still have to commute, you still have to rig your boat. So much goes into it that sleep is the last thing that you get, especially during the peaks of the season as a guide.
And they always say nobody wants to hear us complain. And I don't think we're really complaining, but I don't think people understand. Just because I may be in the boat with you for 7 or 8 hours, our day on a guide trip or a production, I mean, you shoot TV stuff and do like a lot of the same stuff that I do. I mean, your day starts several hours before and is done several hours after, if not more, and then lining things up and check. I don't know about you, but I think I spend more time checking weather. You know, I'm on the Great Lakes. I spend more time checking weather because even if I don't care, I'm here. People want an answer, but we both know that. I had a weatherman in my boat about 10 years ago. I had to fire him as a client because I said, people will just murder you. I'm going to have, you know, police escorts to have you fishing with me because he didn't get it. I said, dude, are you kidding me? I said, we all hate you. I don't even know you and I hate you. I honestly think the weather, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but the weather estimations, if you will, I think are worse now than they were 15 years ago when I had to listen to a little squawk box. Now I got it on my phone and it's worse, I think.
I hear you. You know, so much goes into it and it affects so much. I mean, I think you have 2 aspects of the weather. And I always joke, I say I'm like a 90-year-old man because that's what exactly. You stare at the weather all the time. Like it's on your focus point. It's on your talking points. And, you know, you have the barometric pressure effect on the actual, you know, activity of the fish level. Then you have obviously the surface activity of wind and, you know, climate conditions of, hey, can we fish in this safely, you know, and or can our clients and our guests handle those type conditions? And, you know, it's a whole new thing. You talk about, you know, being in Colorado, the Rocky Mountain region. You know, I have lakes that are down at like 6,000 feet in elevation by Denver. Then I have lakes that are at like 10,600 feet above tree line, to where you literally, I mean, having, you know, 60, 80 mile an hour winds are not uncommon because we have so many thermal changes of the mountains. So it is. I'm 100% with you. Like I stare at my weather all day long, just trying to figure out what's possible and what the day is going to be like.
And again, I don't want this to sound like a bitching session, but just going back to yesterday, we scheduled basically a double. So we're shooting 4 episodes. Because the weather is supposed to be 5 miles an hour. And in April on the Great Lakes, when you have 5 mile an hour winds, it's like the greatest thing ever.
Absolutely.
We had 20 out of the northeast and then 20 out of the southwest. And it was
brutal.
And so it died down in between to switch around for the go around. And then I was like, And then I was actually going, man, we have zero wind right now. This is going to be really bad because we were trying to do a drifting jig show, and I thought we're gonna have to change what we want to do in order to produce. Well, then that didn't matter. Then we're drift bags everywhere, and we're just hauling ass.
Oh yeah.
But you're help everybody, maybe the guys that follow what I do or guys just tuning in here doing the Google search bar or something. Help us understand what Nate does and kind of how this has evolved for you. Like my company, Bigwater Fishing, has evolved greatly just keeping up with the times and trying to make a buck fishing. But so give me a little insight to how you've done that.
Absolutely. I'd say it's the same thing as you. You start off with one thing, and then whether it's times that change you or, hey, we're just getting older, maybe we're getting smarter, maybe we're getting more established, whatever the case may be. You adapt and you try to roll with it. But, 20 years ago, started off as a fishing guide, living the dream as that. And as you grow with that, obviously, you build a little bit of a name, you get some partners, things get a little easier. I had no intention of ever being a tournament angler, but I struck a deal with London Mercury in like 2006, and it was a requirement. Hey, with this level of endorsement, you have to fish tournaments, and that kind of opened up the whole world of promotions. So it started off with tournaments, and it went into TV and radio and writing and just all the kind of stuff that comes with that kind of pro angler side of things. So really that was kind of the biggest change up for me. And now we kind of continue that. We do a ton of digital content. I host a radio show every Saturday, a lot of stuff like this, social, TV. We still guide a lot, have a lot of guides underneath my brand, which is Tightline Outdoors. Own some tournament series myself now. So we own a walleye tournament series, run a big ice fishing tournament series. Just kind of
that's a lot of headaches right there
of fishing.
You just named a lot of headaches right there. I can appreciate some of those headaches. You definitely you gotta love it because there's some headaches thrown in there.
I mean, that's it. And the nicest thing though I'd say with that is we're always busy. And again, we're too busy, but again, I'd rather be busy than not. So as something happens, if like this, if all of a sudden we have a quarantine, Colorado, we're like on strict lockdown, stay at home. They're closing stuff. It's nice to be able to fall back on radio and promotions. I have a lot of buddies that just do one avenue of the industry. And they're scared right now. At least if you're, branched out in all these different facets, you're always going to have something that's going to keep you busy and keep some money flow to survive as a fisherman. Again, it's a lifestyle where everybody wants to be this lifestyle, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I think it's a lot more work than most people think. And again, just trying to have that buck is everything.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I've said this on 10 of these things, so I won't get too deep into it. But if people knew what we did not that we don't make a good living, but the hours that we put in and the level and all the stuff and the liabilities and all the equipment and everything.
Oh yeah.
Like if you were to go to the bank and erase fishing on that, and this is my business plan, they would probably not even let you in the doors, right?
Oh, absolutely. Say that if let alone the hours. If you and the other guides and the other people out there in our shoes, if you actually put an hourly wage to the time that we do it, you would never want to see that number. Like you would never want to see what you actually make hourly, because again, you don't want to calculate for the time rigging the boats and rigging your baits before the trips and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we could probably go to any retail job in the country and make more money than we do if you actually broke it down hourly. But it is what it is. It's a lifestyle we chose, and we love it.
And and I think we'll back up here in a second, but it's just like I just think about yesterday. And again, we don't have to go far back, and I'm sure you wouldn't either, to come up with an analogy. I mean, yesterday we were on some really good fish, and this when you're doing, you're shooting shows or digital content. There's a lot of times, because of either what you're good at or how things set up in your area, that you could do the same thing pretty consistently, but you're trying to get something different. You're trying to do something different, or just, you like to switch it up. And maybe it's guide clients that, hey, I don't want to do this. We want to jig, not troll, or the other way around.
Yeah.
We were on some fish, man. I mean, just like the deal. And way bigger average than what you'd get this time of year. All by ourselves, haven't seen a boat forever. And with that weather, supposed to be 5-mile-an-hour wind, and we get out there and it's, you don't have to live in Ohio to know that Lake Erie with a northeast at 20+ miles an hour, you go to a casino or I don't know, an indoor swimming pool, or you don't go fishing, right?
You go up the rivers, whatever.
Yeah, and so I told the guy with me, we weren't even. I could still see my trailer in the parking lot, and he says, "What are we gonna do?" I said, "I don't know, but we're already on Plan C." and fortunately we bailed out and we kind of hid out in an area that we could, and we caught a bunch of fish. And it was, but again, for someone that just jumps in that boat, like maybe one of your guide clients or one of mine, they just go, oh yeah, he just went here. But that's years of experience of knowing, what happens, and putting yourself, just not going someplace to go someplace, and then having the equipment and having the preparation that, we switched gear totally. And we had that with us already, fortunately, and maybe not everything we wanted, but enough to get that done. And I think that hopefully the goal, just like your stuff, because I've watched some of your stuff, the goal is to, when people watch it, that they don't know that you went to plan C or D or E or F. Right?
I mean, that's it. I honestly, I think it's the guide mentality in both of us that bring you there. You hang out with, and we both have mutual friends that are very strict, hardcore tournament anglers, and nothing wrong. And these guys are absolutely amazing stallion fishermen. But so many times as a tournament angler, they bring the boat or the gear on their boat that they need for that specific body of water, that specific bite. Hey, we're pulling spinner rigs, we might have a few cranks, but that's our goal. As where I think that it's the guide background that you carry, 70 tackle trays and 50 rods, because you're like, dude, we have no idea. And, the last thing you want to do is go home and switch out all your gear from a walleye trip to a smallmouth trip to a steelhead trip or whatever. I carry it all with me because, again, anytime that I have to spend more time at home rigging is less sleep I get and less money I make. So I carry everything with me. And I think that's what really helps you as an angler is having, again, that background, whether it's tournaments or guiding, you mix it all together. And like you said, you can jump to plan C, D, E if you have to because you have the stuff with you. It's that guide mentality. You're like, hey, I was planning a trolling, and the guy steps on my boat, and he's like, absolutely not. I am not pulling a planer board to save my life. I want to hold the rod, or vice versa. You're going jig fishing, you watch the guy work a jig for the first 3 minutes, and you're like, it's not going to happen. Like, we're going to have to troll today. Again, that guide mentality helps you, jump at spur of the moment and capitalize on conditions.
I've got a 22-foot Ranger that, the amount of tackle you can put in it's pretty crazy. I had a guy not that long ago. He had this big backpack, and God knows what was in it. But he's like, I need to stow this away. And he's like, what compartment? And I'm like,
not an option.
And I'm like, I've got a dry bag you can put it in. He's like, no, can I put it in one of the compartments? And I'm like, and so he opened one of them, and he was like, holy OCD. He's like, everything is labeled and like all. I'm like, dude, I got to find this like this. When you're bouncing around the waves, I can't be, when it's pouring down rain, having my compartment get filled with water because I'm looking for something. And just like you said, now we got to switch to a jig or a blade or a troll or a spin. Yeah. You got to be dialed in. And what people think of as me being OCD, when I go and fish with other guides or, some of the same people that we know, and they're the same way, and then you go, you know what? That guy just happens to be super successful. That guy happens to be super. It's almost a mandatory trait in the game. So I know guys that are an absolute train wreck on shore. A train wreck. Their truck just looks like a hurricane. And you get in their boat and you're like, dude, this guy's, because you have to be.
Yep, you have to be.
You have to be.
I agree. It's so funny because you look at even people's lifestyles and you're like, man, how does he get it done? You get on their boat and it's just like, you get your priorities straight. I'm the same way. People show up on the boat and like, where can I put this? I'm like, underneath that console, that's your spot. I'm like, you can do whatever you want with that spot, but that's yours. And they're like, dude, you got a compartment? I'm like, not a chance. I'm running a 21-foot 10-inch nitro, and you couldn't put a pop can in any of the storage compartments just because again, we have the stuff that we need, and for me, I'll guide 10, 12 species, in a month. We have everything, and I kind of jump around between all these species. It's just being in Colorado, we have so much opportunity. You have to have it with you. And again, the last thing I want to do is have somebody say, hey, we just crushed walleyes. We had fun. Hey, can we switch up species? And you'd be like, no, man, I don't have the gear with me. So you bring it all, and you're just always ready.
And that's one thing that you've got that's different than us. And not that we don't have it, probably the variety that people, if you come to Lake Erie, people generally speaking want to fish walleyes or smallmouth. Yep. Some perch, some steelhead, this and that. Our difference would be it's not that we're chasing as many species, but as you go from the western to the central to the eastern basin, it's like being on a puddle, a big lake, and the ocean. So, rather you're going from rigging or jigging to, dipsy divers and jets or lead core, copper line. So, and all those things just really take up a lot of space. And it's not one rod, it's having to have 6. And it's like, I need a tow behind boat, really, is what I need. I need a tender boat.
And that's it, and I mean, again, I think most people watching this are the same as us, so they know it. But I mean, talking about gear, because it's the thing that you hear the same as everybody. Everybody wants to be in your shoes. Like, man, I want to be a guide. Same thing. You're going jigging. The average friend who's a well-adapted angler, they have 1 or 2 jig rods. When you're a guide, I take 4 passengers in my boat, so I have to have 6 jig rods. So I always have 2 rods, so as they mess up, get tangles, break a rod, it's rare, but again, you have
Ziploc
to
bag
have it.
full
So
of extra spools.
everything, so you have 6 of everything, and then every bait, the last thing that you can do as a guide is ever look a guy in the eyes and be like, hey, man, sorry, that was my last one. Like, you just lost it. I apologize, but it's out. You have to have 6 colors of everything. So where, a normal guy has a box of stick baits or a box of rogues or a box of flicker shots, whatever, we have to have 10 boxes of that stuff just because, again, you have to have 6 and 8 of every color of every size. And again, I know that people are thinking this as we're complaining, but I mean, it's a disaster on gear. You have to have so much to get through. It's crazy.
It's funny that you say that because I've got a client who's a character. He's one of those guys you'd fish with for free if you hit the lottery, right?
Yeah.
And he looked at me last year. I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he says, I've been fishing with you like, 8, 9 years. And we fish a handful of days, together at least every year. And he said, we kind of do the same thing. He goes, like, you do the... He goes, even when I hear them other guys are catching them on something, he goes, hey, we're catching me. He says, you kind of do your own thing. And I'm like, okay. I said, I know you well enough to know there's some kind of sarcastic, comment coming here. And he goes, why the $100 million worth of tackle when we only use these, like, handful of things? And he goes, you switch to this and this. And he was right, with everything you're saying. Oh, yeah. And I'm a pretty simple fisherman. Like spinner blades, for example. I probably got 3,000 of them in my boat. But I probably use 6 to 10 of them primarily, right?
Absolutely.
And having extras of them. And I wonder if this is the same for you because you've got guys working under you too.
Yep.
Probably 80% of the tackle in my boat, and I'm probably not exaggerating that much, is gear. Like one of my guys uses brand X of this, or he uses this color. And if he gets on them, I'll make a switch. Now, fortunately, not knocking them guys, fortunately, I'm usually on it enough I don't have to make that. But let's say 10% of the time when somebody's on them and they're using a different brand sinker or crankbait or something, I'm not going to mess around when his buddies who are on a corporate trip are 100 feet away from us and they're smoking them on something. That is the worst feeling, like what you brought up. And it doesn't happen hardly at all to me, but mainly because I've bought an extra 50 grand worth of tackle, you know what I mean? That never gets used. It's like, oh, this is nice and shiny. Put this out. So I mean,
that's it. You can't ever be in that situation. In our shoes, I mean, people look up to you. They dream about the days of fishing with you. And the last thing you can ever do is not catch fish because you don't have this. I mean, again, if you happen to be at the boat dock and people are loud, even if they're hardly catching fish, everybody talks it up. They're like, oh man, this is the bait to use. And it's easy to get in your clients' heads or even our own heads. They're like, hey, this is working. The last thing you can do is ever be on the water and not have what you need. I agree. I hardly ever use it. I'm probably 90%. I use 10 of it and I carry 90 just for the sake of having extra weight in my boat. But again, if I ever do need it, that once a year, twice a year situation,
it bails you out.
I always have it with me, and I never have that weird feeling inside, like, oh man, do I not have that? Like, you always carry it, you always have it. And again, it's like anything else. If you have it, you don't need it. It's when you don't have it that you always need it.
Well, and I have a funny short story that I actually told this guy because he said to me, he goes, for all that, because he's a business guy. He's like, okay, all the money you got tied up. He goes, why wouldn't you just have a bad day? I said, you want that to be your bad day? I said, you get a guy comes from Iowa, you know what I mean? You don't want to.
Oh, yeah.
A funny story. So there's a guide here who actually has passed away since, but he was a retired guy. One of the nicest guys you ever met in your life. Wasn't the best fisherman.
Yep.
Just full disclosure. And I used to help him privately. I said, you tell anybody I'm helping you, game over. And he called me up one day, and this guy was old enough to be my grandpa, at the time, and he calls me up, and he was just happier, flip phone, okay? He was happier than a pig in it. He says, I'm on him. He's, I see you over there. He's, are you catching him? I said, yeah, well, it's okay. He goes, we're just wailing him. He goes, you've helped me so many times. He goes, oh my God, I can finally repay you. He is, we're pulling reef runners. And, I've been with reef runners since I was in high school, back when they started. And if I don't have 6 of every one they make of the 400 colors, and that's no exaggeration, I didn't get one. And I had a father and daughter with me, and we were catching fish. Now, the worst thing, I don't do the VHF radio thing much.
Yep.
Mine almost never on. But nowadays with cell phones, and I got my ringer screaming loud because one of the days the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour. So this young lady standing 3 feet away from me hears that they're pile driving them. So she immediately is like, Dad, they're smoking them in that boat over there. Now, keep in mind, we weren't doing bad. Like, you know, we had picture taker, you know, like giant fish and everything. But like, I mean, he was, you know, on this a little bit. So literally we were kind of making the same type of run. There was nobody else around. And it's a very long story, but the short version is this guy can't figure out what to tell me what color reef runner it is, but it's a stock reef runner. So I said, well, just text me a picture. He said, well, my phone, I don't know if I can, how to do that. So his clients end up texting the girl in my boat. True story. Because I'm like, you know, I'm trying to run the boat. We got weather, right? And I said, here, what's your number? She's like, da-da-da-da. So here she texts this number over or whatever. So she's like, yeah. I said, okay, here's the deal. The reason I had him send it to your phone is I'm going to run the show here. I'm going to get everything going. I said, you go through this big giant compartment here. And she's pulling out these boxes, right? Just pulling out boxes. And I said, when you find that, it's in there somewhere. I said, there's at least 2 of them in there somewhere. Pull them things out and you let me know. She's like, I swear to God, this is true. This is not a fisherman's story. So she ends up finding them. I, to this day, don't know what the color is. I literally don't even know. I think it was one of those like they did locally for us. You know, they did a lot with Reef Runner and it never made the shelf. I never had the color in the water. That bait had probably been in those boxes for a decade, and that's zero exaggeration. I put that thing out, and you can relate. You had to put it out. If I wouldn't have put that out, they would have been like,
absolutely.
We were even if we never caught a thing, I did my part. You know, we got 5 other lines out. It is what it is. I put that thing out. I swear to you, Nate. I swear. And this has not happened since, which is part of the funniness of this. I still got boxes laying all over the deck. I'm trying to put them away, and I look up, and the board's just going back. And I'm like, I preach at all my seminars, color's number 10 on the list. You know, we got to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
That day, whatever the hell that color was, you needed it. So that thing goes back. We get it back. It's a giant fish. We're taking pictures. She's holding these things up. And I was like, hey, Dad, could you move over here a little bit? You know, he's standing there behind her. Yeah, what do you need? I'm like, nothing. The board's underwater, the same one. So we get that. He's reeling that thing in. As he's doing that, I take the other one because we found 2 of them there. I get all the tackle boxes everywhere. I'm reeling in the other inside board to put that one on, right? By the time we got that second fish on, that one was gone. And we kept both those. They never made it past the inside because they just kept going. We caught a few fish on here and there. But the funny part of that story, kind of going along these lines, and I swear to you there's zero exaggeration here, I don't know if I've caught a fish on that thing since.
Oh, absolutely.
And I have tried it under similar circumstances when we've actually been catching fish pretty good. When, you know, you maybe it's not the deal, but you catch 1 or 2. You know, you get a straggler. And again, I do seminars and I base them and say, hey, color's like number 7 or whatever on this list of things you got to have. But when it is, it is.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I agree. You know, sharing stories, craziest thing I've ever seen in my life with color. I mean, obviously, you have days where it doesn't matter at all. I mean, zone and speed, everything else I think is so much more important. But one of those days you get them. I had a situation for almost 2 weeks straight guiding night trips for walleye here in Colorado. We do a ton of post-spawn night fishing. You know, we have way too much bait for our own good. So a lot of times our night bite's about the only way we can produce our bigger fish. And I had like a 2-week stretch, this is a couple of years ago, where my big fish would only hit new baits. So I'm running like Smithwick Rogues Pro Series 4.5 inch, nothing special, right?
Like they wanted the shine, you think, or?
It was the shine. So as fish were chewing on them, it was becoming dull. We would still catch like males and would catch immature females, but a bigger female would only hit the shiny bait. So literally, after you caught 5, 6, 8 fish, the bait was toast. So, I mean, how you pick that up? And again, it was one of those things that we lost some baits. I put a new bait on and boom, caught a big fish. And like, it took me 5, 6, 7 days before I realized that only the big fish were coming on brand new bait. So then I put the pattern together, but like it hurts your head as a guide to think about that. Like
I don't want to think that that's a thing.
This in my life, on pike, on lake trout, on walleye, on bass. Like, you know, how many times does it matter? In our heads, we tell ourselves it doesn't. You know, it eases our mind, but I mean, you know, how many times in life has that happened where you're like, oh, you know, and you can't even think about it because again, it'll wreck you. You'll lose sleep at night. But I mean, there's times when things matter, you know.
I program myself to say that those things don't because I control what I can. But
Yep.
I've actually seen it with bombers and bandits, just what you're saying, because the way that the chrome on those works.
Yep.
And I've seen it, and I've got both of those brands that you can see through them.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite reef runners is a ripstick, and I've had this thing since, I don't know, the late 90s when it was one of the first original run, and I can see through this thing. The vacuum-plated chrome is almost gone, and it still just straight up catches them. And I mean, it doesn't even look like the same bait. So then again, you go, okay, like you said,
where does it end? You know, you get to the point of doing that, then you start.
It wrecks,
I mean, it's a disaster to start thinking about what affects them. You know, so I agree. You just try to have confidence and use what works.
So speaking of wrecking you, I don't know if this is a good or bad transition, but I can remember somebody telling me that at one point in the day, and me and you, our careers have kind of evolved similar in some of the things that we've done, but. Because I don't guide I'm trying not to guide as much because I can't do the other stuff. But just like you said, you diversify, right? And you don't want to turn things away because your no is somebody's yes. But at the same point, I remember hearing that you guided 300 days. You know.
Yep.
I mean,
for years and years, we were. I think my best year ever was 317 days on the water between ice and open water. But for almost 10 years, I did 300 days a year on the water, and I'm the same as you now. I'm still guiding weekly, but I mean, it was always 7 days a week. There was no option. As we're now, dwindling back to 3-4 days a week, stuff like that, just to run the business side of things. But I did 300 for 10 years.
Yeah, I've got clients. You can't do 300 my way because just our ice season, we get it, we don't, and then the waves. And you could book it, but you never actually run it. But still enough when you're going, 20. We were just talking about this the other day. When you're going 20 some days in a row, if you think you like to fish, you're going to find out if you do.
Right? Oh, absolutely.
And as one of the same group of that guide clients, he always says to me, he said, so. Yeah. Like I'm, pose this to you. He'd come up to you and he'd be like, "So, how's your wife's boyfriend? How many does she have?" In all seriousness, I mean that's tough on a family deal. That's a tough situation.
Oh, it's crazy, and it is. I was obviously, back then I'd say I was, a little bit of a younger man and no kids yet and things like that. And it's crazy. I mean, I'll never forget. 2007, I took a month break from tournament fishing in 2007, and I guided 30 days straight in May, and I did doubles every day. So we guide 6-hour trips. So we do a 6 to noon and a 1 to 7 is our basically operations. And I was pike fishing for big northern pike. It's a trolling board bite, big wind blown, high elevation lake, and I did 60 trips. I pulled off 60 trips in 1 month. It's kind of like my all-time record. But again, I mean, I would go home for a couple nights, and all in Colorado, all of our lakes are spread out. We don't have much water. Our water is amazing that we have, trophy class fish, tons of fish, but we commute, we don't have a lot of water like most places in the country. So from where I live, I'm an hour to 2 hours from most of my lakes. So again, a lot of moving around. With that being said, I did those 60 days or the 30 days, 60 trips. I'd go home for a night, then I'd sleep in my truck a couple nights, then go home a night and sleep in your truck a couple nights. I mean, you would really get off the water, after a 20-mile-an-hour wind and just crushing you. To the point where you would just get in your truck and be like, I'm done. Like, whatever. I'll sleep here.
My producer's feeling like that right now after shooting 4 segments yesterday.
I mean, that's it. It's brutal on you, man. Again, and you get out 12 hours in the water, and people are like, man, that's bad. You get an hour break in between your 2 trips just to retie stuff. So you're 13-hour day there, but you got 2 hours in the morning driving, and then you got 2 hours, re-rigging baits, and you know how stuff gets. I mean, you and I fish, we can a lot of times get through the day without messes, but you have brand new people. I mean, you break stuff, you ruin stuff. On a hot day of board fishing, we're running pike, we're running 100 feet back, 150 feet back on baits, then boards, you get a pile of 40-inch pike, where you're wearing on your line from your board, you're re-spooling at night. And again, just the disasters that come with it. I remember that year, that 06 to 2010, I was hitting it as hard as can be. I was doing 60,000 miles on my truck, towing a boat between
tired just listening
Colorado
to you.
And driving to the Midwest to fish MWC events. And I mean, I think I went through 12 or 14 flat tires on trailers, axles on boats. I mean, when you guide hard, and you're the same as me, stuff's not meant to really be ran that hard. We both have amazing partners and sponsors, right? We run the best gear out there. I don't care who makes it. If you beat it hard enough, stuff just breaks. It's not meant to be used in the weather conditions that we do and the extreme amount of use. People have reels that last them, 10 years. I mean, when you really pound on stuff, I mean, stuff breaks. And when you really hit it hard, I mean, back when I was doing the 300 days a year, it was unreal, the equipment that I was going through on the average day.
It's funny you say it because I had some, this college fishing thing. I mean, that would have been great to have when I was around, right? Or when I was getting going. And I'm talking to these college kids. They're asking me about stuff. And they said, so what do I really need to do to, excel? And what should I? And again, probably no different than us 20 years ago. The answer they were thinking and what I gave was way different. I said, you got to be really good at fixing shit. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I said, I'm pretty good at it. I got some guys around me. I've got one guy that works for me that's like MacGyver. And they're like, what do you mean? I says, we don't have time to go have something sit at a dealership for an average guy would sit there for 2 weeks if they could get it. Me and you probably got enough connections. You get it done in a day or two, but that's a day or two you lose of work and maybe more than that waiting for parts. So, I've got extras just like I know every good guy does. Extras of everything. I mean, literally just boat parts, you name it. But now it's not just having that part, it's knowing how to get it taken care of, right?
Yep.
And people think that a lot of the stuff that we do is excessive, but again, until you're that guy that's supposed to go fishing for 3 days with us.
That's it.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? So there's so many things that go into it. But I guess the one thing that, because you run hard like I do, and, especially as we get older, because again, these questions, when I'm 25 compared to now, it's a different answer, right? I probably look at the guy talking to me here and say, man, this guy's nuts. But how much does your body, I mean, are you doing things like I'm eating personally? I'm just going to answer my question a little bit. I mean, I'm eating way better. I'm working out consistently because I can't be bad on myself and be able to get through what I need to get through. So have you evolved with that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I would say it hit me. I'm 37 now, and I would say it hit me probably about 4 years ago. I mean, I was the ultimate fisherman growing up. I mean, living on gummy bears and Twizzlers and Mountain Dew and, I mean, whatever sugar you could get in your body to stay awake. I mean, just, awful. Didn't eat. You live on your boat. I mean, what kind of exercise do you get, 13 hours a day on your boat for, 100 days straight type stuff. And it hit me, in the younger 30s. And I'll never forget, I ran into you, I think long before I knew you, at ICAST. I think you were walking around with somebody, and I was out jogging because it hit me hard. It was one of those situations that I had to start.
That's right. I do remember that.
Yeah,
that's funny.
It was one of those times that all of a sudden I was like, I'm trying to drive to the lake in 2-hour commutes, and I'm falling asleep in my truck, and I mean, getting to the point where it's dangerous, I remember I was sight fishing on the ice, looking down a hole, trying to find this big laker that this guy keeps missing, and I fell asleep in the hole, and I mean, just to where my body was like, you're done. So, like 4 years ago, I started getting better, and 2 years ago, I really flat out, gym, diet, everything. In 2 years, I've lost 45 pounds, and I got to the point where I had to. I was like, it is time to get in order. And yeah, so now I would say, taking care of myself is priority, and it was the point where I couldn't do it anymore. For sure.
You know what? I never would have come up with that, but I 100% remember it. That I was walking to dinner or something at ICAST from the hotel or vice versa, and you go by, and I can't remember who I was with, to be honest, but I remember they're like, who's that? And I'm like, I don't really know the guy, but he's on the ice team with me. I know it's Nate, but I don't know him. And I'm like, he's obviously psycho. I mean, because who in this heat would be running right now?
I mean, that's it. It was the point where I was just like, I came off the water that was the time I was probably doing, 280, 300 days a year. And it's like, hey, if I'm not up at 1, 2 a.m., like, this is my time, guys, to get in shape. So, yeah, I mean, it was a must, And again, I think it's one of those things that, I mean, if your body handles what you're doing, keep doing it. Because, I mean, I would say, honestly, that working out and doing that, it adds a lot to your life. Again, all I want to do is sleep, and taking an hour to get to the gym is hard to find when you push your schedule as hard as ours. But it's the point where it's a must. It has to be. And talking ice team, that's probably the biggest thing in Colorado. we're so, whether you want to call it political or whatever, we have so many rules and regs. I mean, I guide on 16 bodies of water. I have to have a permit on every body of water that I'm on. So every body of water I have to have a permit on. And with that in the winter, I can only drive a snowmobile out of my 16 bodies of water. I can only drive a snowmobile ATV on one body of water. I am walking on all the others. So in winter, I have 15 bodies of water that I have to walk on. Now,
is that because they're worried about the machines going in, or?
We're the headwaters of the country. So we're on the Continental Divide. So on the east side of our peaks of our mountains, everything goes to the Atlantic. Other side, everything goes to the Pacific. We're the headwaters, so they consider our waters like a premium. We can run, I run a 400 horsepower Verado, right? Who knows what exhaust comes out of that thing, but they're worried about oil, gas dripping on the ice. So they're worried about any sort of toxins on top of the ice. They're worried about being able to fluctuate water levels in our reservoirs. So it's like 70% toxin, 30% safety of vehicles. But regardless, it's like not an option. I think maybe in the entire state, we can drive trucks on 2 bodies of water. We can take ATV snowmobiles on maybe 20 in the entire state of Colorado.
God. And you know, just backing up for a second, anybody that's listening to this, I don't care how tough a boy you think you are. Like me and you both work a lot of events for Ice Team, right?
Yep.
And one of my favorite things, and I know you're going to laugh because I know you have, if you don't get this, I'm going to be shocked. I'll be talking to some guy and he'll be like, man, that X200, I seen you using that on your show. And I'm like, oh, I love it, you know? And I said, be honest, I kind of make it a one-man Shaney. I take out a seat, you know, and you're talking to the guy and he's like, well, me and my kids we're gonna put that. I'm like, oh, how old are your kids? Oh, like 6 and 8. Oh, okay, yeah. I said, you make sure you get this universal hitch. Oh no, I'm pulling it out. And I'm like, I look over the guy and say, I ain't trying to judge you, man. I said, I'm trying to judge you, but you ain't pulling an X200 anywhere. You know what I mean? People don't understand, like with what you just said, if this went over somebody's head, like I can appreciate this. If you walk more than 100 yards on ice, you're gonna think that you went up to Mount Everest.
That's it. So you are the same as me, right? Customer care is everything. It's the world today. You have to take care of your guests. It's just what it is. So I want you to imagine taking like an X200 or say a Voyager and tying 2 of them together, back to back, and dragging it across the lake through snow. And that's the thing that really got me to that physical state a couple of years ago, because it was just like, I mean, you have 3 guests and they're older people and they're like, hey man, I can't drag that shelter out there, to where literally you're tying 2 shelters together, power augers, Vexes, all your stuff, and dragging 2 shelters together across the lake. I mean, it's heart attackville. And that's where I was like, I got to get in shape. And it's brutal. So our winters are beyond physical demanding. 2
things come to mind that you're going to, now that I'm getting to know you a little better, you're going to be on my survivor team. Okay. My apocalypse survivor team, note to self, call Nate. And number 2, you might be at a little bit of a screw loose.
Oh, totally. Totally. It's funny. So I have a huge trailer that I tow. It's like my boat on ice that I pull up to the edge of the lake. And I always look at guys and I pull up the GPS and I'm like, all right, man, premium spot. Like, we want to wreck the fish today. Here's where we're going. You know, it's a half mile. And I always look at them. I said, hey, I'm gonna help you drag, but we can walk, go fast, be super mobile, and we can carry a bucket with some rods and graphs, and we can hit it hard. Or we're going to drag these shelters. You're going to be warm. You're going to be comfortable. You're going to be able to sight fish, but we're going to be slow. And if I start to struggle, you're going to help me drag a little bit. And I always give it the question to the people. I'm like, hey, what do you want to do? But I was like, oh, we're good at the shelters. They walk like 20 feet, and you can see their brain just turning like, let's go back and grab the bucket. Sounds like a good idea.
Anybody that's listening to this, if you don't understand it, try it one time.
One time.
Absolutely. That's all it'll take. 20 feet is about accurate, probably, too.
Oh, yeah. It's brutal. And again, that came with that whole concept of just being, physical. Hey, you got to get it done. And again, I didn't think it was going to hit me. I didn't realize I was getting old until, you start doing that. And I used to pile these things in my truck, and now it's like I have a trailer to put them in. Just loading an X300 in the bed of your truck, full of gear is a disaster, let alone dragging it out on the lake.
Yeah, and then I'm sure you're like me that, you add all kinds of stuff to it, and you got things put in it and things you don't take out of it. And, you try to pick up an X300, it might as well just be, a stack of plates at the gym. But So, one thing about talking about a guy that's been there, done that, like you have, that I can appreciate, because everybody nowadays is so political, right? Everybody is so, they're like, you ask them something like, what their favorite food is, and they're thinking there's some backstory or something that they, may get, put out there. But clients, I mean, I'm not asking you to throw names even necessarily out there or anything like that, but, I've had some famous clients. And it has created some interesting things. And any guide that's like the guy in his area, like like we kind of are. I don't want to sound like crazy guy saying that, but when you've done it long enough, you get guys that gravitate towards you, and the publicists, you're dealing with PR people and stuff. You've got to have some stories. I know you do.
No, it's crazy, man. And you do. You guide so many people, and I mean, some some you don't know, and we've had everybody. We've had. Have you ever? Let
me interrupt. Here's a good one, because I've had this. I'm betting you have too. Have you ever had somebody that was famous, but you didn't know they were famous, and then they were pissed because you didn't know they were famous? Like, that's the worst, right?
Best story ever, right? So I mean, we've guided famous rappers and all the athletes and this and that, but I got a guy, he books, and he goes, hey, man, I just had a break in my schedule. I want to get out fishing. So I move things around and make room for him, and he shows up. And, I mean, I'm a fairly tall dude. You're a tall guy, but I'm 6'3". I wouldn't say that I look up to a lot of people, right? Maybe eye level, but I wouldn't say look up. This guy walks up, and I'm like, holy cow, this guy's like 7 foot tall. So I'm like, whatever. So we're out fishing, and we're talking about something. I'm like, what do you do? And he's talking about basketball, and then he just keeps going off about all the basketball stuff going on. And I finally am standing on the back deck of my boat. I'm dramatically high, and I'm like eye level to him, and I'm like, man. I'm like, you should really play basketball. Like, you're that guy. You know about it. You're tall. Like, you're passionate. Like, you should play. And he kind of laughs, and we move on, and then we talk a little bit more. And like 10 minutes later, he finally gets that, like, I was being serious when I told him he should play basketball. And he goes, do you know who I am? And I'm like, yeah, you're so-and-so. And he goes, I played, Major League Basketball for like 10, 15 years. He goes, and I'm the coach of the Nuggets. And not a clue. Like, not even a clue of who he was.
Obviously, Nate is not into sports, because when you don't even know your own local area, you know what I mean? That's pretty bad. Or good, depending on how you look at it.
I guided a hockey player, same thing. Like, he's the star Avalanche. Not even a clue. But it's funny because I now have relationships with a lot of these, what are you going to call them, famous or celebrity type people. And they love it simply for the fact that I'm never that guy. It's like, hey, man, can I have an autograph? Hey, can you get me tickets? Like, I could care less. Like, to me, they're all the same person, just because I don't live in that world of sports. So we have great relationships, because he's like, this is awesome. He goes, most people that find out who I am, it's just constant questions and bugging and wanting, and almost abuse of the relationship. And I'm like, dude,
they're out with you to get away from that.
Absolutely. So how about yourself? You had any crazy stories?
Yeah, I mean, it's most of mine would get me thrown under the bus, but it's I've had guys, it's when you get the PR guy or somebody that sends you the NDA or. My again, I was young when this happened, and I don't even know honestly how they even came about. But I had guys where, because of your boat, our boats will go pretty fast. I mean, they're not like a bass boat, but they go fast. Yeah. And some of these guys, I don't know if you ever even thought about this. Some of the NFL guys and the Major League Baseball guys that I've had legally aren't supposed to be in our boats. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah.
So I've had to sign stuff because this dude wants to take his girlfriend's kids or whatever the deal is out, and they're in town for a game or training or whatever it is, and so they want to go out, but they can't. Hey, you can't put me on social media. You can't do this because I would void my contract. And you think about those things, and I can remember going, that seems kind of crazy. But then there was that guy. I don't know if he played, because I'm like you with the pro sports things. I mean, I love college football. I went to Ohio State. Go Buckeyes. I watched that. We're crazy religious. If you're a Michigan fan, I'd click the computer off right now. But in Florida, there was a guy a pitcher or somebody, one of those Cuban guys. Or Dominican guys that had got some yacht, and he drove it off over the break wall. I don't know if you're in the news. And now I kind of go, okay, I get it, but that's kind of different when you hire a guy that's a professional, and then some dude takes a $5 million yacht and drives it over a rock wall. But yeah, you get some really. I think for me, the ones that are the most are the guys that don't really. I'm not sure why they're there because they don't really want. They can't think about getting out of the boat fast enough, and it's usually it's some music people, but it's usually movie stars, and that's the one I can't. And they're very like I shouldn't say they because I don't want to generalize, but the ones that I've had don't seem to really want to be there, and they're fairly sure of themselves and just if not downright pompous. Where you're like they don't. We're just a fishing guy. I don't need to even speak to you. Don't look at me.
Absolutely.
And you're like, and I've had enough of those that I can say that it's not across the board, but it's a fairly accurate stereotype. And maybe that's even shitty to say it that way. But same thing with you.
It's the same thing. I've guided quite a few people in the rap world or the R&B, whatever.
See, I haven't had no rap stars. Now, that would be awesome.
People that every single person watching, whether you are 6 years old or 90 years old, you would know these people. Again, I don't think it's fair for me to drop names, but it's the biggest of the big. And same thing, man. You're in there and you're like, you almost like you're not even supposed to speak, type thing. Like you're the servant, and the craziest thing is I have these guys in my boat and they're bodyguards, right? They're like, they're the biggest houses, right? And these guys will start doing things that are not allowed. Not allowed anywhere. And I'm like, hey man, you can't do that. And these bodyguards are like, they're looking at me,
what do you mean, boy?
Over me. Yeah. And they're like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, my permit doesn't, and you're like, you mean nothing. Rules don't apply. Laws don't apply. Like, it's just a whole different world.
I've had some of those, and I've had the guys go, hey, we're going to tip you real good. And I say, well, I appreciate that, but your tip isn't going to allow me to retire because that's what I'm going to have to do. Yeah,
that's it's crazy, and a lot of people seek it out. There's a lot of guides, especially in Denver, that really seek out the sports. Like they want to be like the official guide of the sports team and stuff like that. And everybody asks, like, man, why aren't you in that world? And I'm like, not that I don't appreciate it, because again, it's cool. I've had some experiences with some of these people that it's neat. It's neat to say that you did it, but in reality, I would rather have the guy that's there because he wants to learn. He wants to have an experience. He wants to bring an experience to his family. Again, I would say that the average Joe is hands down my favorite guest because, again, we can't control fishing. Right? If you fish a little bit, if you're that guy that picks and chooses, you have amazing trips. If you're the guy that grinds, like me, 300 days a year, you flat out have bad days of fishing. Like you can do everything right, and there's days where fishing's just not good. And again, if you're taking the celebrities, if you're the high profile, like those guys, it's hard to deal with because you get bad days. If you have the guest that is there to truly learn, to take away from the experience, whether it's fishing's epic or not, they're going to take away value out of the trip, and it's a win. Because I avoid it. And it's funny because now I get these high profile guys, and I send them straight to my guides. I'm like, hey man, I got a trip for you. They're like, you don't want that? I'm like, no, I'm good, man.
100% right. Because a lot of those days, and I can't imagine you not agreeing with this, is when let's say you got 4 or 5 hours that just you could catch as many fish as you're catching right now, and you've got to stick with it. And a guy, a rap star or a country music guy or a movie star, he don't care, don't get it. He's just like, we're supposed to be catching, we're not fishing. Yep. But if you could, that guy that really wants to be there or the guy that's trying to learn from you, he's still enjoying and picking things up while you're doing that. And then at hour 5 and 6, or the wind changes, like we just joked we had yesterday, all of a sudden now you just start jacking them. But most guys will say, hey, we want to head in before that even happens. And you're willing to put it in because, you're like me. I don't even have to know you to know. Anybody that's done this for a long time, you've got to have that drive to want to do good for people, even if they don't really care.
Yep. And 100%. And that's it. And things change. And you have to grind. That's just what nature of the beast is. Have that confidence and push through. And again, you have so many people that give up on you. And the true anglers, the guys that are there for it, are the best. And those are the guys that I try to seek out as my guests for sure.
And I can remember you saying something and doing a little research on this, and I thought it was like words out of my mouth, of getting other people to catch fish. Like if you jump on the boat with me and we're pulling boards, I'm going to do things different. Maybe I can show you some tricks because I probably do it more than you do, or at least that style. And vice versa if we were doing something for pike or whatever in your body water. But I'd like to think that I'm going to be an asset in your boat and vice versa.
Yep.
But when you have a guy that fishes 1 or 2 days a year, he's not a fisherman. He's somebody that's going to go fishing with you, and there's a very big difference there. And our job of getting that guy to catch fish on that day in the allotted time, that's a challenge.
Oh, it's crazy. And, I talk about this. We have a lot of people that want to work for us or be a new guide and things like that. There's guys that are flat out sticks. I mean, you give them a rod and they're incredible. I mean, they are flat out incredible, but that's not what makes a guide by any means. I don't fish on my trips. None of my guides fish on our trips. This is one of our rules. People don't pay us to watch us catch fish. We are all about that client experience. And, I have a handful of people in my life. My dad's one of them. I mean, the awesomest dude ever. Taught me to fish, but to this day, he is a Zebco push button kind of dude. Like he will go to a tournament with me to pre-fish, right? You're on unbelievable jigging waters, and there he is with his Zebco. Like it is an old school dude, but like I'll have a new guy that wants to work for me. I'll be like, hey man, he goes, yeah, I really want to. I'm like, cool, let's go out and do some fishing, and he'll jump on the boat with me and he thinks he's going to fish with me, and I'll bring my dad. I'm like, hey man, that guy needs to catch some fish today. I'm going to hang out.
You pull the dad card on him. That's naughty.
And I make them take somebody who might be a typical customer, a very challenged to catch fish. I'm like, hey, if you can get him to catch fish without you touching a rod, let's see it. And it's unbelievable to watch guys that fall apart because, again, the true talent or skill of a guide is reading your customer, figuring out where their talents are, what they can do, and making that bite excel for them. And there's times where, again, you have hot bites, you're like, oh, this is going to be great. And you get out there and they just can't figure it out. And you're like, what do I do? You can't just give up and you can't just grind through, just keep telling them, hey, this is it, and not let them have success. I mean, you have to adapt your technique to make everybody catch fish. And that's really where the true skill lies. It's crazy to see.
I mean, you may live a handful of states away, but I think we're separated at birth there with these things because, and you can pick a guy that's a bass guide or, you're doing your pike stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It really, the species doesn't change, maybe just the tackle you carry, but it doesn't change the philosophy and really what's happening. But I can't imagine before we run out of time and we could talk probably for about 6 years, but I mean, I could never let you get away without talking about some of them big walleyes because that's my passion. And I don't know what you've got out there exactly. Now, I've seen some pictures. But there's some sleeper stuff out there. It's like some of the guys in Utah. Again, Facebook has allowed this to creep out. And I know it's been going on for a long time. So with the rainbow trout that you have, I mean, we've even got it with some sawguy places and some small reservoirs here that have gotten out because of social media. What do you have there, with the big walleyes? Is it the trout that's kind of helping that out or?
It's a combination. So we have the ultimate in situations. Number one, we have tiny bodies of water. I mean, a big reservoir for us, like where I was fishing last night, it's a Denver metro body of water. It's like 70 foot deep, probably an average 30-foot depth. But to a Coloradan, like the average Joe, it's a big lake or it's a big reservoir. And I think the thing sits at like 1,900 surface acres. I mean, it is literally a boat dock bay for everybody else in the world. It's tiny. But we have gizzard shad as a forage, and then we have big rainbow trout as a forage. So our fish start off feeding on shad, high oil-based food source as a young fish. And then once they start crossing over into that 25 to 28-inch range, a lake like that will get 30 to 50,000 catchable rainbows a year stocked in there.
That's so these like rainbows steroids for them.
10 to 12 inches at stocking point, and it's the highest protein food source ever. The water comes into this body of water. It's a main drainage called the South Platte River. So if you counted water cycling through, you would consider every particle of water in that reservoir cycling through in like 10 days. That's how much oxygen and new water comes in. So we have a massive amount of minerals. We have oxygen through the roof. Our short time of growth as far as like water temperature wise, we top out at like 72 degrees. But since we have river water fluctuating it, our lower base of water temperature stays cool. We're like 11 months out of the year in the max growing season. So we don't get that super hot water in summer that slows down growth, or super cold water that slows down growth. We have growth, 11 months out of the year. So our state record here. Our state record here is like 18 pounds, 13 ounces. But they do a massive netting operation in spring on 3 bodies of water where they net our walleyes, they collect, obviously the eggs and the milk, and they basically trade it with other states. So we trade for pheasant, we trade for turkey, we trade for wipers and tiger muskie and all kinds of stuff. But, they see 20-pound fish in our nets on a regular basis. So if an angler were to stick, you were to stick a giant female at peak pre-spawn conditions, seeing 22-pound fish wouldn't be uncommon. It's the same kind of phenomenon that you're seeing in Oregon and Washington, on the Columbia, of just some freakishly big walleyes. It's crazy.
Very cool. Yeah, that's. We kind of have a similar situation with our growing season where we're not in the hot, we're not in the cold, and our water turns over. I can't remember how many days on Lake Erie compared to Lake Superior it takes for that to cycle through. We're so much more fertile.
It's great. And, the hardest thing for us with these big fish is finding the right customer to chase them. Once a walleye makes the major crossover into feeding on rainbow trout, which is on that, for the most part, it's that bigger stage, our fish lose interest in small presentations to where, we stick some big walleyes on your normal stick baits and, all your normal spinner rigs and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, if an angler were to come to me and say, hey, I just want a double-digit 15-pound fish, I am looking for a tank, we almost have to switch our approach to bass, pike, lake trout type gear, to where we're throwing 8 and 10 inch swim baits for these baits, where our big fish lose interest, in the general husky jerks, rogues, all that type presentation, to where you're literally throwing massive swim baits at these fish, and you're seeking out a handful of bites a trip, let alone if you're going to hook that fish, or you're casting, 12-inch baits. And it's one of those things that it's hard because we have tons of big fish, but we don't see them caught as often, strictly for once they switch over to that bigger food source, they're never feeding on a minnow this big. Everything they're feeding on is big. So you have to, basically match that hatch and fish those bigger presentations. And it's hard to do, but it's a neat technique to see happen.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, because I can totally relate to this, where you said, have the right person, because kind of like that big deer you got on your wall back there.
Yeah.
Guys, if somebody wants to go sit in a tree stand, our neck of the woods, or go out there with you and spend 6 hours, you're probably not going to get what you got over your shoulder there. The time, and it's the same thing with big walleyes. These are freak shows. There's not many of them. They're smart. They're weary. They're very crazy. You can't expect, to put 4, 5, 6 hours in, and all of a sudden you're going to get one of those.
Yeah, that's just it. You got to work for it, especially when the techniques change and you have to throw crazy and different stuff. It's one of those things that you just got to do it, but you have to have that commitment. The problem is most of these guys know about your bites. Last night I'm night fishing, and I have opportunities at big 30-inch fish, and I have a lot of opportunity at younger males, 17 to 20-inch fish, good eating fish, and immature females in those low 20-inch range. And I'm like, hey man, we can go catch a mess of these, or we can go seek out 2 or 3 bites on big fish. And everybody's like, big fish, and you get 2 hours into it, and they're like, totally. Well, maybe we want to switch up and catch some numbers. And it's hard to have the mentality to be like, hey, man, we are going to grind for that trophy. If you do it, you're rewarded, but you have to be able to take that risk. And not a lot of anglers are willing to take the risk.
On one of the other podcasts, the analogy I used was the guy that said he was going to go and sit for a trophy deer the whole year. And the first doe that comes out, he smokes in 5 minutes, and tears up his spot, right? So on these big walleyes, are you primarily night fishing, or are you trolling or casting, or how's that work?
Right now, our big fish is going to be a night pattern almost all year. We have daytime stuff, but those rainbows are going to cruise basically all day long, kind of suspended in the water column. At night, our rainbows don't have great vision, so at night, our rainbows tend to come higher in the water column and stack up on that shore. So basically, you have better odds of a capitalized food source at night. So night fishing is key. Casting is great if you can do it, but trolling, honestly, is going to keep your bait in the strike zone longer. So trolling planer boards at night is really going to be the peak bite for those big fish in that window. Why
don't you leave us, because me and you could talk till we were unemployed. You know what I mean? Me and you sitting down for an hour is like a fart in a jug, right? Leave us with one tip, that people should know about just fishing in general. You pick it, whatever it is, because I'm always amazed at what people come up with. Sometimes simple, sometimes kind of outside the box.
I'd say the two biggest things that I stick with as an angler is number one, cater to your fish. I think everybody expects fish to be a fish. You talk about a strike window. I mean, I break things down in like 3 to 6 inch increments. Hey, put that bait 3 inches over their head. People look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. I think the easier you make it on a fish to feed, the more fish you're going to catch. And that's in general. Walleyes, pike, lakers, salmon, whatever. I think so many anglers expect fish to work hard. They're like, hey, it's a dumb fish, he'll come to me. The more your ability grows to cater to a fish, bring a bait to a fish, your increased success goes through the roof. Number two, everybody gets caught up on patterns. They listen to a podcast, they read a magazine, they watch a TV show, and everybody is like, hey, water is 60 degrees. It's May. This is what I should be doing. And they stick with those patterns. Thinking outside the box. There's no rules in fishing whatsoever. No rules. Your bass tackle catches walleyes. Your, pike tackle in this situation is catching big walleyes. So, number one, cater to your fish. Number two, there's no rules. Do different things. New patterns develop all the time. A couple of years ago, we filmed a TV show with In-Fisherman, maybe 5 years ago, catching giant lake trout on top water. We literally discovered a bite where we're throwing like Zara spooks for a 20, 30-pound lake trout, and it is literally the best technique you'll ever use. Something about thinking outside the box. You can develop new patterns, but again, you have to break out and try stuff. So cater to those fish, try new things. It'll blow your mind at what you can find out.
I would agree. We get stuck in doing what works, and we forget to pay attention to what's changing around us.
100%. And again, everybody looks around, they see boats, they go to the boats, they see what boats are doing, they do it. They catch enough fish to keep their mind entertained, and they stick with it. As to where if you can change it up enough, it'll blow your mind at the success you'll find.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with us. Why don't you let everybody know if they want to do some hunting and fishing out in Colorado? How do they get a hold of Nate and his crew?
Nate Zelinsky, search it, you'll figure it out. But my fishing business, everything comes under Tightline Outdoors. So tightlineoutdoors.com, Tightline Outdoors on Facebook, and then just Nate Zelinsky. You'll see a bunch of digital content on the hunting side. Everything lives at bowtecharchery.com or Ruger Firearms. That's where most of the content lives on the hunting side. But again, just search out Nate Zelinsky. You'll find it. And would love to share some education with you.
Thanks again, Nate, and everybody for tuning into the Bigwater podcast. We do the fishing. We talk about it too, but not the other way around. You actually have to do it, right? Some guys just like talking about it. We do both of those. So I appreciate your time again, and hopefully we'll get on the water sometime soon.
Absolutely, man. Would love to.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.